Alright, hello everybody. Today we're going to be talking about kind of an interesting thing that I've been sort of trying to change my thoughts around what the Disc Priest's role in a raid is. And that is to do with kind of the hybrid aspect of Disc. So originally going into Legion, you know, everyone thought of Disc Priest as being this kind of 70%, 70%, you know, hybrid, like a real hybrid. So, you know, they'd be doing 70% DPS of a DPS and 70% of the healing of a healer. Now obviously now that's not something we're seeing. We're more seeing, you know, like a 20% heal, 20% DPS, like 100% healer kind of thing. So where Disc is much more focused into a healing role as being, say, a pure hybrid. And honestly, I don't know what Blizzard's intention was originally, because we had a lot of things changed that kind of made it so Disc wasn't, you know, went away from kind of this hybrid model and then more into a healer model through just some of the changes in the beta, and especially to do with how DPS trinkets interacted with Disc. I think that was a kind of a big downfall for the spec, because that was something that did, you know, impact us a lot, is when we had these huge you know, huge amounts of damage coming from our trinkets, whether that was a bug or, you know, something that was never intended, with you know, Schism increasing the damage of the trinkets, and then artifact abilities, and the percentage damage on the artifact and whatnot. Anyways, that all came out, so Disc was doing a decent amount of damage and doing a decent amount of healing at the same time. But then obviously upon the release of Legion, you know, we saw that Disc was more focused into this kind of you know, 100% healer, more 20% DPS kind of thing. And I just wanted to say, put up like a comparison of, you know, how the DPS has changed. So if we look at, say, the first kill of, you know, Ursoc, you know, we're doing 142k, we're doing about, you know, half that, or a little bit less than half that, so like 40% of a DPS. You know, and if we compare this to, say, you know, what you know, if we're saying we're doing now, so, you know, Croesus, kind of the equivalent fight in the Nighthold, we haven't really seen Disc DPS go up too much, and that's to do with a lot of things. Keep in mind that they did change the scaling on the artifact ability, and I don't have 54 traits yet, so that's a huge amount of damage I could have on top of this. But you can see I'm still doing, you know, 88th percentile damage here, and I am, you know, falling behind this, you know, 40% mark, and this is only going to grow, you know, greater and greater and greater as we start to get, as DPS start to get their 4 pieces, as they get more gear, as they scale better with a lot of things. You'll find Disc falling, you know, further and further behind, and in the percentage that, you know, Disc does, and that makes them less of a hybrid. So, you know, and what does that mean for, you know, me thinking about you know, things to do as a Disc Priest? Now there's a couple of things. Obviously, you know, there's a lot to do with smite. As I said in the recent raid guide I put out, you know, smiting is no longer, you know, I personally wouldn't consider, you know, smiting worth doing just for damage. You know, it's not mana efficient enough to be using constantly, and then, you know, even when it's doing no healing, it's just not worth it. You're in the raid to be a healer, you're not in the raid anymore to be a hybrid. So there's no point in using smite pretty much at all, unless you're going to actually be doing a significant amount of healing with that. So, you know, that comes when you have, you know, 5 targets or so where you're actually going to be getting effective healing from that smite. So, you know, in turn, that means your damage is pretty much overall going to go down. Your damage relative to your DPS and your raid group is going to go down. Therefore, you're going to be having a less of an emphasis on, you know, being that sort of putting out as much damage as you can. And a few things come with that. So, one of the first things that I myself personally will be doing will be transitioning into getting more mastery, favoring more haste and mastery. And that is just because mastery actually scales relatively, well, very well with your healing. And as we're seeing, atonement is now becoming, you know, I'm at 73% atonement. You see a lot of top logs where atonement is going upwards of 80%. And the more atonement healing you get, the more value mastery is worth. So, you know, there's a lot of value in picking up a high amount of mastery. Another thing to kind of complement that, which I was thinking about today when I got a new neck, was that the actual neck enchant, the Mark of the Claw. Now they did buff Mark of the Claw and Trained Soldier and the Priestess. So one thing I was thinking about as well is, you know, hey, as a healer, the last thing you really want is procs. You don't want to be relying on procs, and especially as a Disc Priest, haste procs aren't the most ideal. The crit procs are alright, but still, again, it's not ideal. So why would I be running with a proc, you know, neck trinket? So, sorry, a proc neck enchant. So, you know, I have actually done now switch over my neck enchant to Trained Soldier, so the 600 mastery, and that's, you know, pretty much all come from the fact that now sort of I've moved into the, well, not moved into the mindset, I'm sort of gaining, you know, the mindset of being, you know, not worrying about damage, you know, not considering the damage component of disc, and moving more into just being, you know, 100% healer, which I'm sure a lot of people will go, well, duh, you know, Disc Priest has been a healer, but, you know, it is something I did consider, you know, as playing disc as being something for a very long time. It's like, well, okay, I'm a hybrid, so, you know, I care about, you know, how much damage I'm going to be putting out, and that is something I did emphasize, you know, right from the start. You know, I say crit haste is pretty much the way to go. You know, if you want to consider yourself as a hybrid, you know, if you want to consider yourself as a full healer, go haste mastery. You know, that's something I said from the very start, and it's something that, you know, I was kind of in, you know, that was my way of thinking for a very long time, and now just kind of, you know, seeing that the damage that I'm doing relative to other people and how much damage people have gained, you know, in this later 7.1.5 patch, and how that's not being transferred over to the Disc Priest. You know, it's something, it's kind of like a shift in my thinking, at least. I'm sure, yeah, as I said before, I'm sure, you know, a lot of people were probably miles ahead of me in this thinking, but, you know, transitioning now, I will be going, you know, completely away from basically haste crit. I'm going to be transitioning into full haste mastery, and I'm also going to be actively trying to smite less and radiance more. I know that's been something, it's kind of a reverse of a lot of things I've said in some guides, but I think it's going to be, you know, very rewarding in the amount of healing I get off. So we can see even on this Croesus fight, we'll see how many smites I cast. 38 smites. So, you know, ideally these periods here where you see lots of smites together, this is parts where it's going to be wasting a lot of mana. So that's kind of when, you know, there'd be a downtime, you know, we're maybe waiting, you know, when the ads are spawning or something, then I'm just kind of smiting on excess. You know, that's the kind of thing I'm going to try and actively improve. Smiting less, either, you know, not pretty much not doing anything, even though it's a, you know, not the best way to play. And then, you know, trying to get out powered shields and radiances and all that good stuff more, to ideally increase the healing we're going to be doing. So anyway, I hope this was informative, and I hope you learned something, and thanks for watching.